Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another whiskey review, and quite the review at that. Spoiler alert, but we're essentially going to be talking about my favorite whiskey of the year and what is definitely going to be a whiskey of the year contender for me, and I know quite a few other people that are feeling that way as well. Curious to see what we're talking about? Stick around. Thanks for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. Very, very excited to get to drink this again with you here. We are talking about the Bardstown Bourbon collaboration series, the Amrut. Now, Amrut is a Indian single malt. So this was finished in the Amrut malt. Man, there's a whole bunch going on with this blend. Let me pull up the stats here and we can walk through it. So first off, we'll go through the price. The price is $160. So this is a pricey bottle. I think it is worth every penny of that. And then I'll be discussing why I think that throughout the next couple minutes here. The proof is 110. And then the ages range from 8 years to 14 years. Now, what is so interesting about this in that wide range, there's actually 5 different whiskeys in here and 5 different mash bills at that. 2 of the mash bills, predominantly 63% of this blend, are Indiana ryes. Now, the first one is a 9-year that is 51% rye, whereas the other one is an 8-year that is a 95.5% rye. So somewhere in the middle, I kind of associate that type of blend with Sagamore and some of the things that they've been doing. But that does range from 8 to 9 years on the ryes. Now, the ryes are what was finished in the Amrut as well. So then, after finishing them in those barrels, either they intended this crazy plan all along, or maybe they felt that those barrels were missing something. They then added to the blend 17% Kentucky 14 years, 15% Kentucky 10 years, and 5% Kentucky 11 years. And the mash bills on these look relatively like something that would be maybe Wild Turkey and maybe Heaven Hill and maybe, what's the other one? I guess Jim Beam. Do I got that right? I think so. So quite a few impressive whiskeys in there, and especially the bourbons, all in those double-digit ages. And that blend is really going to play into the story of this one as we go through the tasting notes. What is amazing about this one is that all of those components shine through in this blend simultaneously, as well as those finishing barrels. You'll understand what I mean in just a moment as we go through the tasting notes. So if I've intrigued you thus far, hey, let's go through the breakdown of the nose, the palate, the finish, and then I'll show you the final scores. Thanks for joining this far, whiskey friends. Cheers, everybody. Oh, the nose is so good. So the nose on this one, endless well would be one way to describe it. This is a whiskey that you could easily spend an hour with just the nose, if you're the type of person that really does like to sit back and just explore a whiskey and take your time. What hits me at first is the oak and cherry, which I imagine is coming from that 14-year to start off right out the gate. But then it sort of subsides mostly into those ryes, and you get this wave of spice and pepper, and even get that like honey that I get a lot from MGP. The maltiness isn't predominant on the nose. We'll talk about the maltiness more and more as we go through the palate. That's one of the top questions that I've gotten so far about this pour, is how much the malt shines through. Honestly, it's quite subtle, but if it's something that you're like really adverse to, maybe you'll notice it more. I think it blends perfectly into this. The other thing that shines through, I mean, there's a lot of fruits going on beyond just the cherry I mentioned off the top. There's some apple skin, there's slight orange, There's even like some tropical notes. I'd almost equate it to a fresh shaved or fresh scooped coconut. So the flesh of the coconut. Man, and then it's spicy, but there's like baking spices too. It's just like this predominant amount of baking spices. Endless well, I could go on for a myriad. I could just sit here and just keep breaking it down and pulling out things. So when it comes to the nose on that one, I adore this nose. I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. Let's go into the palate. Cheers, everybody. I love mid palate. Finish is really good too. Up front, the cherry initially shines through. The oak starts shining through. Oh, and there's a bit of orange, a bit of honey. All of that up front. Now, I will say the most, barely, it's only above average. I gave it an 8, is the mouthfeel. So the mouthfeel is creamy, but it's not as rich, dense, oily as I would want for something that comes out in the end, this elevated. The mouthfeel actually held this score back from being even higher. Now, then when we get into mid palate, you know how I went off that whole laundry list of flavors on the nose? That whole laundry list of flavors is there mid palate. We could go on and on. It's almost comical. But essentially, every component of this is somehow providing a flavor note. So this whole blend is equally contributing to the overall taste. And I can't think of another blend that magical to that degree, especially blending 5 different components, some of them finished, it being a Burai. Flavors we're talking about here are going to be custard, the cherry again, and the oak. So that definitely comes through even more. Honey, graham cracker, ginger. A lot of my typical MGP notes have a chance to shine. The rye comes breaking through. And then what I really enjoy about it, so I already mentioned the cherry. There's also orange and apple peel, as I mentioned. I mean, all those things come through in the taste. And then at the end, there's even like a little bit of slight mint. So the rye and the bourbons, I mean, they just like keep coming at you back and forth. And you do get that maltiness more and more when it comes to mid palate. And then it will come through more on the finish for those that were curious on where that comes into the experience. So when it comes to the palate, man, another 2 thumbs up, despite the fact that I did have, I wouldn't say negativity about the mouthfeel, just didn't feel as shiningly positive as I did about all the other components. Let's get into the finish. Man, the finish is really good too. It takes you back through that whole process again with these waves of flavor, the oak, the cherry, the graham cracker, the honey, all the different fruits come through. I'm getting a little bit of that tropical note now. Takes you on that journey over and over and over again. And then at the tail end, mostly getting kind of a malt and a honey. Almost reminds me of Yamazaki, actually, like a Yamazaki 12. I get a lot of honey and the maltiness on that finish as well. All right, one more sip, see if I got anything else. Oh, so impressed with this. Just a very magical blend. Kind of mystified on how these components actually came together. So in the end, on the finish, 2 thumbs up as well. So that is 2 thumbs up across every single aspect of this whiskey. I love it a lot. So going into the final scores, flavor score, gave it a 90, essentially straight 9s across the board. I didn't give it any 10s anywhere on the flavor, but straight 9s on each step of the way. Experience score, 94, mostly held up by that complexity of the nose and the complexity of the palate. And then it's also got that nice long finish. So the only place that it actually lost points on the experience was the nose. That one I gave an 8. And then on value, I gave it all the points. I know this is an expensive bottle, being $160, but this is one of the most unique whiskeys I have had thus far in my journey the last, 8 years now. So this is probably the most unique one that I can think of for all of these reasons. And I'm in some ways glad it only cost $160. So that brings us to the final scores. I rate this one as a 93. That then makes it the number one whiskey I have reviewed thus far this year out of 36 whiskeys. And all time, this now ranks 6 out of 189. So definitely going to stress a lot, putting all that in context. This is a very rarefied air that this pour is sitting with me right now. Going to be recommending it, particularly to whiskey aficionados in general. This is one that if you are the type of person that is going to sit down on the back porch and just take your time with a pour over the course of an hour, I think you can pick this thing apart and it will keep you interested throughout that entire hour. Now, if you are somebody adverse to, say, single malt whiskeys, I wouldn't jump all in. I would get a sample, get a taste of this first. The maltiness is really there. So if you are really adverse to it, it does show up. But otherwise, this one takes you on such a unique ride. I think you're going to have a good time with it. So that concludes my thoughts on the Bardstown Amrut. If you've had this, want to know what you think in the comments. Let me know what tasting notes you're getting and if you're getting this whole myriad of notes like me. And we'll catch you on the next whiskey review. Goodbye, buddy.